And the whole time I was like, why are you so stupid? Like,
Yes.
you are a magicless person dealing with mages in a very, very serious situation. Why would you do this to yourself? Hello, everyone, and welcome back or welcome to Book Chat. We are your hosts.
I'm Kate.
And I'm Theresa. It's really great to have everyone here. We hope everyone is having a nice winter and staying warm, or maybe staying cold.
Yes, if you're tired of the warm weather winter like I am, I would like some cold, cozy reading weather.
Where I'm at, we've had cold.
And where I'm at, it's been very warm, unseasonably warm.
Yeah, very odd for where you're at. Today, we're actually, and tomorrow, it's supposed to rain all day today and tomorrow, and that is the perfect reading weather.
Perfect reading weather, yes. That note, I think we should mention that we'll be together for our next episode.
Yes. For our next episode, we are going to be traveling together, having a girls' retreat, and that is not the only reason that episode is going to be special. We're also going to have a guest.
We
on that
are.
episode.
We're going to have, should we spoil it?
I guess we could spoil it. Yeah.
All right.
Who's it going to be, Kate?
It is going to be my mother, Lori. So, and how we do it when we have a guest, this will be our first guest, so it's exciting, but we have them pick the book. So we're going to lead her choice of book.
That leads us to our next topic, which is our book for 2 weeks, which is Rifles for Watie. That will be coming out March 29th.
Here might be a good time to remind us we're sisters-in-law. So my mother is Teresa's mother-in-law.
Yes. Lori is my mother-in-law. And Lori is another big reader. She likes to read.
She does. It'll be exciting to hear why she chose this particular book.
Yes, I'm really looking forward to it. I'm really looking forward to us having a guest and having more people to discuss books with.
Me too. It'll be fun. It'll be quite fun.
Yes. So this episode, we are reviewing Sisters of Sword and Song by Rebecca Ross.
Yes.
Which is we're going to have fun with this one.
We are. We're going to have a lot of fun. I think it's one of Teresa's my favorite genres for both of us.
Oh, yes,
for one thing.
Definitely.
And this was just a really fun read.
It was a fun read for the genre because this is fantasy. It wasn't as dark as a lot of fantasy books. So if you like a little bit of a lighter read when it comes to fantasy, I recommend looking at Rebecca Ross's stuff.
Rebecca Ross is a great author.
She is. I've read, I think, all but 2 of her books now. So
okay.
Yeah,
I've been savoring them. So I've been
sense.
drawing them out.
I mean, I've been reading them since 2023. I started reading her books.
You were the one who really got me into Rebecca Ross. And you might have heard of her because she wrote Divine Rivals and A Wild Reverence. Is that the name of the other one?
A Wild Reverence, yes.
It's the same.
It's the same universe as Divine Rivals, but it's a standalone book. You don't need to read Divine Rivals if you want to read Wild Reverence.
And Sisters of Sword and Song is in another universe again.
And it's, again, a standalone. So you're not trying to commit to a series or anything like that. Rebecca Ross doesn't do multiple books. Usually does duologies or standalones.
If you don't enjoy spice in your book, she normally has very little to no spice.
There's no swearing in the books either, because a lot of fantasy books can be pretty heavy on language, and this one is not.
I would say this one's YA, and it would be appropriate for most teenagers, older teenagers especially. So I would say if you're looking to dip your toe into fantasy, but you don't like a lot of what you hear about on Book Talk and things like that about the spiciness of it, Rebecca Ross is a great place to start.
Yes. I would definitely say start maybe even with this one because it's really well done. It's very well done.
With that, should we get into it?
We always have a structure to this. Before we get going, though, Kate is actually going to read a summary of the book.
Yes. And with that, there are spoilers in our podcast.
Because this is a book club. So yes, we will be spoiling.
So we're discussing the entire book. So if you want to read this one, which we highly recommend, you might stop and come back if you don't want spoilers.
Yes. If you don't want to read it, and if you just want to know the story, then you're more than welcome to stay and listen to what we have to say.
Exactly. All right, let's get started with our summary. All right. Evadne and Halcyon live in a Greek-esque fantasy world where gods have left relics for mortals to find and utilize. The two girls have always been opposites. Halcyon is sent away at a young age to train to become a hoplite, where she becomes enmeshed in a plot to save the kingdom. Meanwhile, Evadne grew up farming on her family's land with the secret wish she could be a mage and sing spells to perform magic. When Halcyon is put on trial for accidentally killing her training partner, who happens to be her commander's son as well, Evadne offers to serve part of her sentence, which is to become a servant to the commander and his family. While serving her sentence, she becomes a scribe to the commander's son, who happens to be a mage, and she too is brought into the small ring of people endeavoring to save the kingdom from an evil mage. Ultimately, the girls and the rest of the underground succeed in saving the kingdom, and each girl learns valuable things about themselves while falling in love and redeeming themselves.
It is from the point of view of both sisters. So the
Yes.
chapters don't go back and forth every chapter, but you'll see the point of view of Evadne, and then you'll see the point of view from Halcyon, and you'll really understand what the punishments are and what they're going through throughout the entire book. So
Theresa, how did you consume the book?
I listened to it and I read it, and the reason that I was doing some of the listening to it, as you can see, I have a physical copy from the library, but I also checked out the audiobook because I wanted to know how to pronounce the names.
Which is much appreciated, because she had to coach me before we started this.
There are a lot of names that are Greek and they're Roman, and they're a little bit harder to pronounce. Now, the audiobook could also be wrong, but I'm basing this off of the audiobook that I listened to, the names that we're pronouncing.
We're doing our best with the pronunciation. If someone messes up, it's probably going to be me, because I read it and I had it in my head how things are. So
how you were sounding it out. Yeah, that's totally understandable. We would like you to know that if that's how you pronounce words, is only because you've read them and you don't actually pronounce them the way that they're meant to be pronounced. That's absolutely okay. That's fine.
Absolutely
we all
fine.
do it. We all do
Yes.
it. How did you consume the book? You just read
Kindle.
it.
Yes, I just read it. I read it on my Kindle. It was on Kindle Unlimited. So if you have an Amazon Kindle Unlimited, it's currently free.
So another way we can encourage you to read this book. Get it out at your library. Get it for free on Kindle if you have Kindle Unlimited. Kate, what did you like about the book?
First of all, I thought the writing was absolutely beautifully done. There were some beautiful quotes I wrote down that didn't even necessarily involve the story, but I just thought was beautifully written. And I find all of Rebecca Ross's works really beautifully written. I also liked that even though it's written for YA, I think it could appeal to different generations. We're in our 30s, and we enjoyed it very much so. So the characters felt more mature than some YA novels, I felt. So I enjoyed that.
Yes.
She didn't dumb things down, which was really appreciated. And I think YA young adults deserve that. I also loved that the story wasn't dominated by a love story. There was one in there, but it was almost a secondary plotline. So I don't even know if I'd call this a romantasy, but
I would not. No,
it's closer to epic fantasy or just fantasy.
Yes.
So I enjoyed that, because sometimes I do enjoy a good romantasy, but it's also really nice to just read fantasy sometimes. And so when she did inject a little bit of romance, it felt just enough. It was nice. And finally, I enjoyed the influence of ancient Greek and a little bit of Rome in there. When they describe their outfits, it sounds like they're wearing like a toga. And then also there's multiple gods in the universe. That was very reminiscent of Greek and Roman gods. So I enjoyed the book a lot, I would say. What about you? What did you like?
One of the things that Rebecca Ross, I have found, is always good at is she has these really good characters that are never the chosen ones. They're just these people trying to survive in the world that they're in, and they just happen to help out because they're put into situations and they're there just to do what they can in the situation that they're in. And I love that she doesn't fall into the hero's journey, which is a trope by Joseph Campbell, where, you know, you have your reluctant hero who's called to duty and they resist, and then they finally go, and then they have some big moment that's going to change them, and then they have their resistance to go back home and resume their life as usual. Like, that's a really basic description of the hero's journey, and Rebecca Ross does not do that.
She takes very ordinary people who happen to do some things that change the course of a world or events. And they're often glad to go home.
Yes, and she often has them in these worlds with this unique magic systems, but they themselves are not magical. Like in Divine Rivals, your two main characters are not magical. And I love that, because so often you have like the chosen one with their great magic and they're so powerful, but they don't realize it. They have to figure it out. Another reason that I really like these books is that this one's sort of coming of age. Halcyon, not so much, but Evadne, yes, is a coming of age story in a way. But so often, especially in fantasies, the main character who's coming of age is so irritating, and they're so ignorant of the world, and they are just annoying. And Evadne is not annoying. I didn't find her annoying at all.
Evadne was a very sweet, very endearing character, I thought.
The last thing that I really liked about it was just the plot in general. I really liked this story of a family divided. You have the Stratton family, Lord Stratton's family, who is trying to save the queen from his sister, who is trying to manipulate her and eventually take the throne. Like, it's very obvious that she wants to be the one controlling the country. And I like that it's not just that it's a family divided, it's that they're plotting in secret against each other. It's not just like in your face fighting. And I really enjoyed that actually for some reason.
And then in contrast, you have Evadne and Halcyon's family who's very cohesive and gets along very well, with the exception of an uncle who went relic hunting who comes back into the picture later. So you have some complicated family dynamics, and then you have just a very healthy family in contrast.
But I do like that Halcyon and Evadne's family isn't like 100% happy. Rebecca Ross makes them human. They still have their problems. They still have their flaws as well. Stratton's family they also get along. You have his sister Lyra as well, who's in there, and then their mom. They're good, sweet people. They struggle a little bit because Halcyon has killed their son, Xander. But in the end, they're forgiving and they're kind people still.
There's just a lot of depth to all the characters, even the side characters, I felt like.
I was really intrigued by the one excerpt that was just from Lyra's point of view as she's going to the quarry.
It was surprising.
It was a little random, but I also enjoyed it.
I enjoyed it as well. What did you struggle with when reading the book? Did you struggle with anything?
The one thing that I struggled with was I didn't find Halcyon's point of view necessary. I think we would have gotten the full story. And it could have been even more intriguing a little bit if we were just looking at this from Evadne's point of view. I understand that she's wanting this to be a book about sisters, but you're mostly reading from Evadne's point of view anyways. And Halcyon's narrative, one of the things is she's in the quarry doing her payment for killing Xander in the quarry. She's suffering because you're reading her point of view. You know that she's being poisoned. And then Evadne gets a bad feeling about it and she thinks that something is going on. And I think it would have been so interesting if you had no idea what was going on with Halcyon.
Would have added some extra suspense.
I did struggle when it came to her storyline a little bit. One, because she's suffering so much, that was a little hard to read.
Yes.
Overall, I did not think that reading from her point of view was necessary. Probably only a quarter of the book is from her point of view. The rest of the book is from Evadne's point of view. How about you? Did you struggle with anything?
That would also be my struggle. I enjoyed Halcyon's chapters, except for the parts where she's being like tortured and poisoned and things like that, because they were a little intense, especially for a YA book. But I just didn't connect as well to Halcyon either.
Same.
I really felt more connected to Evadne. Sometimes Halcyon's chapters felt like I was reading them to get back to Evadne's journey.
I feel like that's true often when it comes to books with 2 points of view, where there's the one character I'm like, yes, I love these chapters. And then you get to another character and you're like,
Yes. Prime example is if you've read The Two Towers, and the second half of the book is purely from Frodo and Sam's journey through Mordor. And you're like, oh my God, is it ever going to end? Let's get back to
and
the
they're
action.
Just like walking and getting lost.
Yes. This book wasn't like that, but I did struggle with just connecting with Halcyon and enjoying her chapters as much.
And you do go back and forth in Lord of the Rings. It's like the first half is one part of the Fellowship and the second half is Frodo and Sam.
Fun fact, my father advised the very first time I read it to do one chapter in each. Like I'd read a chapter in the beginning and then I'd read the chapter in the second part. And that's how I always get through it.
That's a great piece of advice, actually. What part would you return to again and again?
This is a little weird, but I would return to the battle with Selene when they're trying to... I know. I think it's because the image... Oh, it is? I thought I was being weird. I wonder if it's different reasons.
Yeah, go ahead. What's your reason?
I think it's when Evadne really comes into her own. And she, even though she is wounded and everything, she still manages to be the one who kills Selene without any magic. She's always wanted magic her entire life. Damon has used up his magic, is now magicless, is suffering in pain. He doesn't have any memory of why he's there. And Evadne manages to save the day without magic, without anything, just her ordinary self. What about you? Why would you return to that?
That's exactly why I liked it. I wrote the scene where Evadne kills Selene. That is the scene that I would go back to because Selene is taunting her and Evadne has these insecurities. She has this limp from a childhood injury. She wants to be magical. She's not strong like her sister. She doesn't have the magic like Damon. And in the moment when she's killing Selene, she's injured. She's been stabbed by Celine. She has the dagger still inside of her. And she flips the script, basically. She's like, just because you're the mage doesn't mean you're the most powerful person in this room. And she realizes that she didn't need to be as strong as Halcyon. She didn't need the magic of Damon. She could still take care of people and save people. And I loved that.
Yeah,
I loved
I
that
loved
scene.
that as
So,
well.
that's really funny.
That is funny.
I was not expecting you to have the same answer as me.
It's not either. Okay. We've talked about this a little bit, but what subcategory of fantasy or would you characterize this book?
I just put it as straight fantasy. I don't see it as epic. It's definitely not romantasy. I would like to start this by saying I like the romance in the story, but if you took it out, it would not change the story. Damon and Evadne were just really close, scribe and mage, just good friends. I still think the story would have played out the exact same. It was not vital to the overall story to have the romance. I thought it was sweet. I thought it was cute.
Yeah, it was the kind of romance that I enjoy where you see them grow closer together. They're friends first, they grow closer together, and then it's paid off at the end with them falling in love. But it's not a central focus of the book.
It's not a central focus of the book, and there's no lusting after each other.
Yes.
You know, they just have this sweet attraction to each other and they want to be around each other. Did you agree?
Yeah, I think it's probably just fantasy with some romantic elements, but not a romantasy.
Yeah. And I guess a little bit of adventure fantasy when they're headed to the mountain, Mount Euphemius. Evadne and Damon are going through those trials. That's definitely has a little bit more of an epic and adventure feel to it.
That's where it kind of starts to veer that way. From Halcyon's viewpoint, we may have been closer to adventure.
Yes, a little bit. Or actually, from Halcyon's point of view, we're a little bit more dark fantasy. Especially when she's in a quarry.
That's true. Yeah, because most of her chapters are about her suffering and pain and internal and external suffering, physical and mental.
Yes, and another mage is probing her mind, trying to get to her memories to learn the secrets to what she was up to. What was the magic system that the author used in this book?
So the magic system, we've talked a little bit about it, but it was a combination of there are relics left behind the deities who have since returned to, they don't really say, but I assume their homes, which are not on
wherever
Earth.
They're from.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they've left behind these relics that anyone can use. And they do different things, such as one helps a person fly, another heals people, another allows people to see the past, the present, and the future. So there's lots of these relics scattered throughout the world. Some of them have been found, some of them have not. So that's one part of the magic system that allows ordinary people access. The other part of the magic system is there are mages, which we talked about, and they are typically perform magic by two ways, with their dominant hand. So they cannot even write with their dominant hand because the words just flow off the page. And then also they sing their spells. They sing their most powerful spells.
Another part is that these mages are descendants of the deities because Evadne and Halcyon's family are descended from a disgraced god who became mortal because he was in love with someone and he dies and they know where he's buried and everything. So none of them can possess magic because that god no longer possessed magic.
Yes.
But what I found so interesting about the book is that there was no guarantee that when someone was born that they were going to be born with magic. So Damon is sort of, unique. It's like having a family with brown eyes and then you're born with the blue eyes. I'm speaking for my sister who's the only person in our family with blue eyes. And so, it's just like genetics basically plays a little bit of a role in whether or not you're going to have magic or not.
Yes. And they talk about how the elites would look at birth charts and try and figure out what generation is going to be born with magic and things like that. I also thought it was interesting because mages could lose their magic. That's not often seen, I feel like, in fantasy. No. So there's not an unlimited reserve of magic within them. And they can actually just use it all up.
It seemed like Damon, he could use his magic and it would wear him down and then it could, in a sense, build back up in his system if he rested. But when he's fighting Celine, he doesn't have the chance to step back and let his magic come back to him. Instead, he just burns it all out of his system.
Right. Literally coughs it up.
Yeah, the book also talks about this ceremony where the mages would receive a ring based on how much power they have. And the least amount of power would be on the pinky ring and the most amount of power would be on the thumb. And what Damon's was on
the middle finger.
Forefinger? It was on the middle finger.
And then he was a very average mage.
Right. And then he's fighting his aunt and her ring is on her thumb. So she's very powerful mage.
Yeah, which makes his actions really brave.
It does. But they also mentioned that she was the most powerful mage that they had seen in generations.
Yeah.
So again, is going to show how brave he is and how he wants to stop her plans so badly that he would go up against her.
How brave Damon is, and then how brave and how
Avadni.
Avadni, an ordinary person with no magic, kills the most powerful mage in generations. All right. So, how was the author's world building? We've chatted a little bit about it, but what would you say?
I thought the world building was really well done. Rebecca Ross has this uncanny ability when it comes to fantasy world building to not make it overwhelming. So many times when I read a fantasy book, the author, even if they're really, really talented author, they just dump so much information with bizarre names and you're overwhelmed. And Rebecca Ross does the world building in such a way that it's a slow buildup, but you never feel like you're lacking and you never feel like you're overwhelmed. She's just like, there were these 9 deities and we're descended from the one that didn't have any magic left. And then she adds a little sprinkle of something else, a little sprinkle of
Yes.
something else. And I think it's just very, like you said, she's a very beautiful writer. She writes so beautifully. And the way that she talks about the world makes it sound so beautiful. And I would live there.
Yes. I know. It's rare I would live in a fantasy world, to be honest, but this is one
Yes.
that I would live in.
Yes. This one, and after things settle down in her A River Enchanted books, I would
Yes,
live
it
in that
sounds
one too because it
beautiful.
sounds really pretty.
Yes.
Sounds so pretty. So how about you? How about you? What did you think of the world building?
I thought it was absolutely well done. Like you said, you didn't have to understand the entire magic system at the beginning to understand the book, so you were eased into it. So if you're not a fantasy reader, this would be a good book for you because you're not going to have to be bogged down with a lot of different names, a lot of different creatures, a lot of different magical elements. So I feel like it's something that anyone could enjoy.
Yes, and another thing about actually I think all of her books is that while the names on the surface of this particular book are a little hard to pronounce, they're actually real names from mythology. And so you could look it up and you could look up how to pronounce it. So many times when I'm reading a new fantasy series or a new fantasy book, I just cannot figure out what the names are because they're either totally made up or they're from some really obscure mythology that I've never even heard of. I've
Yes.
seen the TikTok where they're like, when you're reading a new fantasy, it's like you're reading and you get to the name, you're like, you know, and it's just like, that's kind of what happens when I'm reading a lot of fantasy books. But with hers, so much of the book is Greek and a little bit of Roman mythology. You can easily figure out how the names are pronounced.
Yes.
So.
And that was a fun part of her world building too, because if you know anything about the Greek gods, you know, there's multiple deities. One thing I liked was we found actually today, right as we were starting this, or I did, that there's a list of the deities. And some of them do kind of mirror what we have in our Greek and Roman myths. So I liked that Rebecca Ross started with a concrete myth and then kind of shaped it into her book and adapted it. I enjoyed that influence of the Greek and Roman mythology.
So we have a goddess of the sun, mother goddess of the sun. We have a god of the sky, airy goddess of the moon and dreams. So yeah, it really does follow a lot of the Greek and Roman mythology.
I knew much less about Greek and Roman mythology. I didn't realize the names were actual names in history. Theresa knew. She was able to dig a little deeper and enjoys the digging behind stories.
Yeah, I do that a lot. And I have a bit of an obsession with Greek and Roman mythology. Just a lot
Just
of
a
an
little
obsession.
bit. Just a little bit.
On this book, things are Greek from my research. So Halcyon is a Greek name. Actually, Halcyon it's not strictly Greek or Roman. It seems to have roots in both, but is suspected to be a misspelling of the word kingfisher. And if you read the book, kingfisher is her code name when she's trying to find this relic. Her and Xander are asked to find the all-seeing crown. Vadni is a Greek from Greek mythology. That is the name of Poseidon's daughter.
Yes.
But then you have Bacchus, who is the Roman version of the Greek god Dionysus. And then Halcyon is part of what they call a legion, and legions are also Roman. So she uses both in this book, which
it
I
works.
like.
It works
I
very
can get
well.
behind that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just to point out, I just thought it was so cool when you told me that the translation of Halcyon was Kingfisher, which I think that's so cool that she put that little hidden detail in there. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think that's so cool.
yeah, I love that. I love when an author does that. Did the book have a gripping beginning?
I felt it had an extremely gripping beginning. I was immediately pulled in because we're talking about Vadney's sister's coming home. She's looking forward to it. And we're also hearing how she kind of is a little envious of her sister because she has like a place and is going to go do great things and that kind of thing. And she wishes she had magic. And so I was immediately pulled into the world. I also enjoyed the dynamic between Advani's family. And pretty soon, Halcyon sneaks in her window. So the story starts pretty quick. I feel like we have a shift in tone after Halcyon is arrested and tried and sent on her punishment. So like the beginning is a little different, a little slower compared to then when we really pick up speed in the book. But it's still a very good beginning that drew me right in. What about you?
The very first chapter was so interesting because her family is so excited. They're getting ready for Halcyon's return. And then she's stumbling into Evadne's window and she doesn't want anybody in the house to know. And I, as a reader, I'm like, what happened? What's going on? I want to know what's going on. And so that immediately gripped me. And because Rebecca Ross is really good at giving you hints of what the world is that you're about to read about, that also drew me in. I wanted to know more about these deities and these relics and the magic systems. Just the first chapter was really good. And then you get a little bit further in and you realize that Halcyon is on the run and she won't tell Evadne why, and you have to wait to know why. And then Lord Stratton's like, oh, she's a murderer. And she just keeps building it. And I love that. It just kept me turning the page to know what's going to happen next.
Did the book go in the direction you expected then?
It did not. It did not go in the direction that I expected. No. I did not read the description for this book at all. All I read was some reviews that it was really good. So I had no idea that Halcyon was going to get caught. I was like, what? I thought this book was going to be more like her running and Evadne trying to prove her innocence. So no, I was very shocked. So then I went back and I read the synopsis and I was like, oh, Evadne's going to serve part of the sentence. Okay. All right. So yeah, no, that was pretty shocking to me. And how quickly things progress after they're both serving the sentence was pretty shocking to me. You don't have this long, drawn out years of trying to serve the sentence. Both pretty much thrown in, especially Evadne, into this new world. And she's trying to save Halcyon, obviously. But she also has learned about this plot against the queen, and she's now serving one of the mages that's part of the plot. And the mages and their scribes have this really close bond. So she has to basically go along with Damon. And she wants to. She's not forced into it because he won't force her into it because he's a really good person. But yeah, it did not go the way I was expecting because I did not read the synopsis, which I actually really like that. I was like, oh, whoa.
Yeah. Which when you have loved an author and you are familiar with an author, you can do that.
Yes. Yes. You're right. You're right. Because I have read most of her books. So how about you? Did it go in the way that did the direction that you expected?
There was a point where I expected Evadne would be the one to save the kingdom. I felt like all signs were pointing to her. That's not to say that I thought it was predictable or any way. I just felt like we were gearing up for her journey, and that would be what allowed it to come full circle. I did at one point think Halcyon was going to die, however. She was very sick, and I did not expect their uncle to have the ring to save her, the healing ring to save her. So that was very surprising to me. And then also, I was surprised by the captain's redemption arc, or the commander's redemption arc, where he forgave Halcyon. And I thought that was a very touching part of it.
That part didn't surprise me because as much as Evadne wanted to hate him, there was nothing in me that disliked that man. I was like, this is a good person.
Right.
He's upset because his son is dead. And so he's had a very human reaction to that. But overall, I thought that he was really well written in the sense that he was not a bad person and he was just trying to get a little bit of justice for what's happened to his son. And that's it. So I wasn't too surprised at that. I was surprised. One of the things that really surprised me was the way that Halcyon was written, because she's supposed to be part of this legion where she's been training since she was 12 years old. She's been training for 8 years, and it's very Roman-esque. And they keep talking about how she's this great leader and she's so strong, and she was highly emotional. And I was like, this does not track for the person that they're trying to describe. And she's having these wild emotions and she's kind of weak in some points. I did not agree with how she was written because I feel like she would have stood her ground a lot more than she did. And I don't think she would have run away when she killed Xander. I thought that was a
Right.
totally unnecessary part of
Yes.
the plot.
I thought that was extremely surprising because then she was labeled a coward, which they talk about that's the worst thing a warrior can be labeled. But her squad, her legion, just lets her back in without any problems, even though she's killed one of their own, even though it was accidental. And she fled from
And
them.
she's run away. Based on the character that Rebecca Ross is trying to build, running away thing made the least amount of sense. She seemed like she should have had honor and she should have stayed there and explained herself, but she is just immediately afraid that Stratton is going to kill her, even though later in the book she talks about how Stratton's the father, is a father figure to her.
Yes, exactly.
That's a little contradictory, I feel.
Yeah.
So, and I do think that the story could have moved along exactly the same if she hadn't run away. Like, if her family hears that she's in trouble and they go to her trials, the book would have been a little bit shorter probably, but I don't think the running away thing was absolutely necessary for the story.
No, I would agree with that. And it
So-
did seem very counterintuitive to this character that was being created.
All right. What foreshadowing was in the book that played out later in the book?
That that Halcyon meeting the mage in the quarry, what was his name? Thalas? With his broken hand was foreshadowing Damon's fate. And it also foreshadowed that her uncle was the Basilisk, the spy master. So I thought there was some foreshadowing there. And I think there was also foreshadowing that the girl's uncle would turn out to be the spy master because there's a basilisk on what was his bedroom wall. So I think there was quite a bit of foreshadowing with the uncle and then with what would happen to Damon. I think that ultimately, because we ended up knowing that the mage's magic could run out, their hand would be broken, that there was some foreshadowing there.
See, I didn't see any foreshadowing because we never find out how Thalas lost his magic. We only know that he has this deformed hand and that he doesn't have magic. He never explains how it happened. So I didn't see it coming at all that Damon would lose his magic and that it would cause his hand to deform. I didn't see that coming personally.
I think in the sense that he says he lost his magic, then I was like, they're capable of losing their magic. And then we have all these hints that Damon's magic is weak, is what I was picking up on.
I didn't mind that Damon lost his magic. It does bother me that their hands are deformed. I'm actually with you on the uncle thing. When Thalas is talking about he owes somebody debt, I immediately was like, oh, that's her. That is her uncle. That's what I was thinking. Because that's the one family member where they just don't know where he's been at and what he's been up to. So
yeah, he's a
and
relic
then she
hunter.
sees the basilisk. Yeah, she sees the basilisk in her cell and she's thinking, oh, that's that spy master. And then later when Evadne is talking to her uncle, he's talking about she asks him, where have you been? What have you been doing all this time that you've been gone? And he talks about, I've been arrested and I've traveled, and then he obviously had found this relic of healing, this ring. So I did think that was some good foreshadowing there. I did think that in a way Stratton's death was a little bit foreshadowed because he was going to sacrifice himself for the good of his legion. So I was not surprised when he died for Halcyon. When he's at the quarry, when Evadne says, hey, can you go check on her to see if she's okay? When he's at the quarry and he's holding her like a baby, I was like, this man deeply loves this girl. So he's going to do whatever it takes to protect her. I was a little irked at both Stratton and Halcyon because Halcyon had a very loving family, but she considered Stratton to be a better father. Stratton had 3 children and he seemed to love Halcyon more than his children. I was very confused by that.
It seemed like Halcyon felt like she wasn't loved by her father in particular when she really was. And she was also sent away at such a young age that apparently a bond formed between her and the captain.
Yeah, I kind of would have liked it if Halcyon had learned that her father loved her just as much as Evadne, but we never get to that. She's just like, Stratton is my adoptive father and I love him more and he loves me more. I did not appreciate that.
I think it's another contrast between the sisters because Evadne is so loyal to her family and Halcyon's family is her legion, even to the point that the commander of the legion is her father figure.
But one of the things that makes Evadne and Halcyon similar is that they both think that their parents are more proud of the other one and love the other one more.
True.
Like they both have come to that conclusion. So because Evadne's stuck at home and Halcyon's off doing great things, so she thinks, oh, this is the favored sister, and Halcyon thinks that Evadne, the singer, is the favored sister, and they're both wrong because they're both loved by their family. So
Their father especially is such a sweet character.
yes, I was really intrigued about the father because he has these big emotions and he's crying and he's ecstatic, and the mom is so even keel.
Gregor was definitely the definition of like a girl dad. He was so proud of his girls, both of his girls.
That is a good point. Kate, who were the main or significant characters in the book to you?
We have the two sisters. They were probably the most significant. They were the main characters, although Evadne is slightly more present in the book. So both of the girls' journeys, I think, were central to the book, and they were the main characters. But then some other significant characters included the commander and definitely Damon, who that Evadne ends up falling in love with, and he's the mage who tries to fight Celine. Celine is also a very significant character as the villain. So that was, if there's going to be a stereotypical character in this book, it's that there's a big bad, that there's a villain, and it's Celine. So, and then the girl's family played a significant role, as did a mage at the quarry who tortured Halcyon and wanted to get the crown for himself and deliver it to Celine. What about you? What did you put down?
Yes, so I wrote Evadne, Halcyon, Damon, Lord Stratton, he's the commander, and then I also put Macarius and Celine. I put Macarius before Celine. He's the mage at the quarry because he's around a lot more. Celine is definitely the villain in the background pulling the strings. She's the puppet master, but she's not front stage for the girls. She's not center stage for the girls. Those are the characters that I thought were significant. I didn't put their families because their families really don't play so much of a role, because the girls are thinking so much about each other rather than their family. Their family's home in their grove. They're safe. They're picking olives. But Vadney and Halcyon are just trying to survive their different situations that they're in. Those are the significant characters, I thought.
Included the family, and maybe it's the family as a unit, not each individual, because they mean so much, especially to Evadne. So they influenced a lot of her decisions and things like that. Did any of the significant characters take on any tropes from the other fantasy or sci-fi works?
I think Evadne did a little bit. She takes on a main character who is weak. She's got this injury. She is in pain a lot, and she doesn't recognize the strength that is in her. But as I mentioned earlier, Rebecca Ross doesn't do it in a way where Evadne is this strong, powerful magician. She doesn't have all this magic. She's not unique in that way. She's unique because she has this internal strength that she never tapped into and recognized that she had. So yeah, I think it is a trope, but I don't think that it was done in a way that is usually done with fantasy or sci-fi. So I think I enjoyed it. I enjoyed Evadne's story very much.
Didn't feel overused at all.
No. And the other trope that I talk about is Celine. I pictured Ursula.
Yes.
When I read about Celine, she just has all these snide remarks. She's super snarky and she just wants to belittle everybody.
Yes.
So Celine was she wasn't a sci-fi fantasy trope. She was more of a Disney villain in my mind. I don't know why.
Yeah,
but
she was like a big bad type trope, like all power, like power hungry, all controlling, has the queen under a spell. So there's a bit of a common trope there.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. All right. Kate, did the author give the main characters any flaws?
Yes, definitely. We've talked about that. Evadne had some physical flaws. She had a broken ankle. And then I feel like, but Halcyon especially, I felt was a more flawed character. She struggled with selfishness, cowardness, and self-pity. I felt a lot of her flaws were very internal, and her part of the story is a lot about her struggling to deal with those. Evadne struggled with doubt and with some fear. She was very frightened of dogs, for instance, but I felt Halcyon definitely had more apparent flaws, which makes sense because she just accidentally murdered her partner. We're going to see her reactions to that, and tragedies and things like that sometimes bring out the best in a person and sometimes bring out the worst. And I feel like for Halcyon, it brought out the worst. I mean, she ran away, she couldn't face the commander, etc., etc.
I definitely saw that they had flaws internally, but when it came to decision making, I thought Evadne was far more mature than Halcyon and
Definitely.
decision making. Because, like you said, Halcyon runs off. The one time where I was like yelling at the book, and Chris will tell you I was yelling at the book, was when Evadne receives this mysterious note from the basilisk, but she doesn't know what that is yet. And she's like, I am going to not tell Damon, and I'm just going to go to the shop, and I'm going to meet this stranger by myself. And it's not the basilisk when she shows up. It's actually Macarius, the mage, who she has already encountered because he has stolen from her in the past. And the whole time I was like, why are you so stupid? Like,
Yes.
you are a magicless person dealing with mages in a very, very serious situation. Why would you do this to yourself? So yeah, that was very irritating. It's it was good because she talks to Macarius, and I'm not sure Macarius would have talked to her if Damon had been present. But in the moment, I was like, you are so dumb. What
Yes.
are you doing?
She was a little too independent there.
She was. I think at some point after she leaves her family, she almost has to prove her independence a little bit, where she
Yes.
can make decisions for herself.
Mhm. Yeah.
So, and
Which
she's
is very
17. We
teenage.
got to remember that.
Yeah, which is very appropriate for teenage development.
All right.
Did you connect with the characters?
I definitely connected with Evadne. I appreciate the struggle within Vadne, where she has this jealousy and this sibling rivalry in a way with Halcyon. Not straight up rivalry, but you know what I'm saying. But she also deeply loves Halcyon, and she's going to do whatever she can to help her and protect her and make sure that her sentence doesn't totally break her. And I really liked that element of Evadne, because Halcyon is over there like, Evadne, you're weak, you can't do anything, you have to stay home. And Evadne is starting to learn that she is a strong person, and she proves that by taking on part of Halcyon's sentence. And I just really related to that, because my siblings can drive me crazy, but if someone was to go after them, I would fight tooth and nail to protect my siblings. Like that, I sure, we're going to bicker, we're going to have our differences, but I love them deeply, and I just love that about Evadne. How about you?
I too connected with Evadne. Her wish to be something she wasn't, or a wish to be something more. I connected with that impulse. I did not connect with Halcyon very much. Another thing I connected with Evadne, though, was her level head and her love of family. But Halcyon, I struggled with it because she had very impulsive ways, her desire to lead, be a soldier. I just could not relate. And then I also felt like I connected pretty well with Damon. I felt like he was a very gentle soul
Okay.
who was kind of living in the shadow of his brother and wanting to do what his brother was supposed to have done. And his brother was maybe greater than him. And I just related to this because if you don't know my brother, he's a very intelligent person, and I love him dearly. And as Theresa said, I would fight tooth and nail for him. But there is some knowledge that he has accomplished more and things like that. Like, I am so proud of the things Chris has accomplished. And even though I wish maybe my life had taken some turns that were a little more similar to his, I am still very proud of him. And if anyone tried to interfere with that, I would react very strongly.
Yeah, I loved Damon's character. And I think it's because he actually kind of reminded me of Chris. He's just so gentle and he's so caring. This is why I liked Damon. I don't think I related to him. I think I related to Evadne being in a relationship with Damon, because Damon wants to take care of Evadne, but he also wants her to be a partner. So he always is like, let's do this. Are you okay doing this? What should we do to make sure that we're both okay doing this? And that's how my relationship is. And I really appreciated that about Damon. And one of the things about Damon and with my relationship is that Damon is obviously very talented. He's very intelligent, but he doesn't act that way. He's super humble. He doesn't see himself as great. And he is. And that's how Chris is, where Chris is like, I'm not the smartest person in the room, and I love that about him, even though he probably is.
Yes, I feel that. And also, Damon was different than a lot of male love interests in a lot of romantasy books, because he's not like,
So
I'm going to
true.
kill anyone who hurts her and I'm going to protect her. It was definitely that partnership element, which I really enjoyed, like you mentioned.
Yeah. And Damon is the brother of Xander who Halcyon kills. And instead of doing this enemies to lovers thing where, Damon could have hated Evadne because she's the sister of the person who killed his brother, he's immediately intrigued by her. He's intrigued when she stands up and offers to take part of Halcyon's sentence. He is intrigued by just her stamina and her loyalty. And he's never like, I hate her, and slowly becomes intrigued by her. He's immediately like, oh, wow, this person is so interesting and so unique. I'd like to get to know her better. I enjoyed that so much.
Damon is ultimately just a very good guy.
He is.
If you could read the book from a different character's perspective, who would it be?
I would actually read it from Damon's perspective.
That's what I said.
Because is it okay? We might have different answers as to why. One of the things for me, just being a Rebecca Ross fan, is, as I mentioned before, usually her characters aren't magical, and I would like to read how she would write a magical character and how she would write about what Damon is going through. And I found it really interesting when Evadne is sitting there being jealous of Damon's magic, and he's sitting there being jealous of the fact that she can write, and she can write her stories down, and he can't do that because his handwriting with his non-dominant hand is atrocious, and no one can but Evadne can read it. I just liked how sweet he was as a character, and I would like to know his emotions behind Xander's death and his father's reaction and his mom and his sister being cold towards Evadne, and then his relationship with Evadne. So that's a person I would read from. And you said Damon too. But why?
I did.
Why for you?
Some of the same reasons. We get a peek into his thoughts, which was really cool because we read some of his journal entries when Evadne does, and he's trying to jog his memory. So we get a peek into them, and he seems like a very genuine, very sweet character. I would like to realize, because I think he knew his magic wasn't going to match up to Celine's from the very beginning, and he was probably going to lose his magic. I think that's a little bit foreshadowed. Well, what's foreshadowed when you find out afterwards? Anyways, but I think he knew that because we learned that when Evadne reads his diary entries and he's recording his memories and things like that. So that if he does lose his memory, which happens when you lose your magic, he would have record of what was happening to him. I would have liked to have read from his point of view as he realized he was going to take on the quest his brother started. It was kind of hopeless. He might lose his magic. And then also as Evadne came along and he realized that maybe things could be a little different. And he slowly, very slowly fell in love with her.
Just a little bit more on the memory loss. He knows that when he loses his memory, it's going to be 5 months of memory. So, and he hadn't known Evadne for 5 months. So he recognized that he was going to totally forget about her and his brother's death.
Yes.
So, which
and
that
also
would be
his father's.
pretty devastating to have to go through that grief. And his father's, yes. It'd be pretty devastating to have to go through that grief again. So.
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
All right. Kate, what moments in the book stood out to you?
We talked about this a little bit, but the breaking of Damon's magic and Evadne's killing of Celine really stood out to me. I thought it was just a very vivid scene. And then also Halcyon's time in the quarry, unfortunately, stands out to me because it also was very vivid, very like a lot of sensory descriptions and things like that. So those two things really stood out to me. What about you?
One of the moments that stands out to me in the book, and I did not understand why it was necessary, is when Evina, the immortal mage who is guarding Mount Euthemius, so that god, what is his name? Hold on. Pyrrhus, the god of fire, because he's trapped under Mount Euthemius, and she deters anybody from arriving there and freeing him. Evadne sees Halcyon go over a cliff's edge, and Evina, who's been around torturing people and deterring them and probably killing them, shows up and chats with her.
Yeah, just randomly chats with her and is like, you remind me of me.
Yeah.
Great.
Yes. And it's what? She was like, I was average too. And I did. And for some reason, when I was writing this out, that scene kept playing in my mind and I was so confused.
I'd completely forgotten about that scene.
Because it was unnecessary, right? Like that scene didn't need to happen.
Yeah.
Although, no, it didn't need to happen. I don't think it drove the story forward in any way. I don't think it changed what Evadne does next because Evadne has a necklace that allows her to fly. And she flies down the cliff edge and she sees Halcyon clinging to a bush or something and she's alive. And I don't think that would have changed.
No, because I think she would have gone to look for her body even if she hadn't spoken with this old ancient mage.
Yes. And even then, I don't think she got the idea from
No, I don't think
Ivina.
so either.
It's Ivina, I think is how
Okay.
So yeah,
Yeah.
that was a bizarre moment in the book.
Yeah, that was just kind of like,
Anyways,
okay, moving on.
yeah. Like we've talked about her enough. We should introduce this character, and I don't think that was necessary.
No, I don't think that. I think her as a
But
existential threat was probably good enough. So, all right. Were there any specific quotes that stood out to you?
actually, quite a few. But I decided to narrow it down to just two because I don't want us to
Yes.
be here all day. The first quote, just a little background on where this is coming from. Halcyon has been sentenced, and Evadne has taken on part of her sentence. And the sentence is 5 years working in the quarry, 5 years in prison, and then 5 years working for Lord Stratton. And Evadne's going to take on Lord Stratton. And Evadne's with her parents, and she's about to leave them. And her mom, Phaedra, turns to her and says, "It does not matter that you serve Lord Stratton's family now. You are your own self. No one owns your soul or your body or your fate. No one but you, Evadne." And I loved that because, in essence, Evadne is an indentured servant. She's basically an
Hmm.
enslaved person in this moment for 5 years with Stratton's family. I would say indentured servant because she's serving off time without pay. Phaedra is like, I know that you're serving the sentence, but no one actually owns your thoughts, who
Yes.
you are as a person. So I love that. Another one, and I know that Halcyon was not my favorite character, but I did enjoy the moment when Stratton is dying and she's talking to him and she
Hmm.
says, "The world will darken without you." And Stratton says to her, "And yet I am at peace to know that you will be its light." And
Yes. That was beautiful.
I don't think Halcyon is the light. I do think of Vadney
Rodney.
as the light, quite honestly. I still like that because I like that he isn't under the assumption that light is dying because he is
Hmm.
dying. The light is still in the world, even without him in it.
Yes.
And even though he was fighting for the good, other people will take on that mantle and they'll also continue fighting for good. So, how about you? And
I had multiple quotes, obviously, but I chose three. One of it is when Halcyon is realizing she needs to forgive the commander and like kind of move on. And so it's all this time she'd been telling herself to let go. But there was beauty and strength in the holding on. And so she's talking about just holding on to like her love for the commander and her family and things like that. And I just thought that was beautifully written. And then the other one that I included is about Evadne. And she's talking about when Damon loses his memories. After Evadne finally understood the pain of breaking, of trying to mend after loss, she felt an echo of Kirkus anguish and she wept as she finally understood the cost of his fall. And Kirkos is the god that chose to stay on Earth and give up his divinity for a human mortal. So, and then I have one more, and I think this is just good advice in general. Would you be sad to lose it? If the answer is yes, record it down before the sunrise. So, if you're a journaler, which I am not really, like I dabble, but I don't journal, but I think that's really good advice just for anybody.
yeah, I actually had that one too. That was one of my other quotes. I liked that one.
Yep. So, there were a lot that I could have chosen.
Kate, what sort of mood did the book put you in?
I did cry at the end of the book. I cried a little bit when Damon lost his memories. I cried out of happiness because it was all really wrapped up really nicely. Damon came and found her and like had read his journal entries and he was still in love with her. And so I cried out that. And I also just felt very content when I finished the book because it was a beautiful story that had a really beautiful ending. And it was just one of those things where you're like, I'm going to have a book hangover because this was a really good book.
Yeah, absolutely. I felt that way when it ended, but during reading it, there were definitely times, and I think this is always good. There were moments where I was so frustrated, and not necessarily always with the characters, just with the situations that they're being put through, and you just want them to be okay. And I think that makes for a really good story when you're so invested in the characters and what they're going through. And then I was happy that pretty much everyone gets their happily ever after. Like I mentioned before, I wasn't huge on Halcyon, but I did like Lord Stratton, and I did cry a little bit when he died. I was pretty upset when he passed away. I think he could have continued being that light. I recognize that my quote means that, the light's still in the world, but I feel like he could have still been a good commander. And it was just so sad that that ring of healing that they have works so slowly that it was either Stratton or it was going to be Evadne, and Stratton sacrifices himself for Halcyon's sister, which I think speaks a lot to his character.
It does. It's beautiful.
But then I'm with you. I loved when Evadne is reading the journal entries from Damon. I thought they were so sweet. And I liked that he would have had to read those to realize who Evadne was and how important she was to him. How did you read the book?
I read whenever I had a moment. I was very invested. So I've mentioned this before, but I have a puppy. So, and he's going out every 20, 30 minutes. And I would come back in and I'd be like opening the book and I'd be like, go do something that's not destructive. I have to read.
Yes, that was me too. I had started by listening to the book, but I always do a little bit better absorbing the information if I can read it. So I ended up going to the library and getting a copy of it, and then I was just reading whenever I had a spare moment. And then I would listen to chapters when I was walking my dog, and that was purely because I needed to know how to pronounce things. So I'd be reading it in the apartment and listening to it on walks. That's how I consumed it.
All right. What music gives you the same vibes as this book?
Okay, I have two, one for Evadne, one for Halcyon. So for my first one, there's this teeny tiny little musician. Well, no, she's not actually physically tiny, but she's not well known. I started following her before she ever started actually releasing music on iTunes. I think she only has 3 singles out. Her name is Amy Carter. She's from Great Britain. And she has a song called One Day Will Fly Too. It's about this girl, and she's getting ready in the morning, and she talks to a bird that comes in and sits on the windowsill with her. And when she wrote the song, it was before she went off to university. And she's struggling with, like, I haven't done anything with myself. I haven't done anything great. And the bird always reassures her, one day you will fly too. And I thought that just was about me to the T. I think you would really like the song, Kate. And I will send it to you after we're done recording. And then this is probably a little too stereotypical here. The song Strength and Honor from the soundtrack of Gladiator was what I thought of when it came to like Halcyon and the Legion and stuff. How about you?
I put down the song Soldier Poet King by the Oh Hellos.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Because
Yeah.
I felt it just really summed up the different roles, minus King, of the two sisters and the opposite that they were. I think that song is about one person, but I thought it was just, you could interpret it as Halcyon and Evadne.
Yeah, absolutely. I like the oh hellos. All right. If someone hasn't read the book yet, what would you tell them that wouldn't spoil the plot to prepare them for what they're about to read?
I would tell them that the book is about two sisters who are very different, but love each other deeply, who become involved in a plot to save the magical kingdom. What do you
So
have?
similar. We are so similar sometimes. I said this like some of the wording even was really similar to what I have. I said, this book is about two sisters with contrasting personalities and different life experiences who love each other deeply and will fight to protect each other, even if it's the last thing they do.
Yep, we definitely took away the same thing from the book.
That's really funny.
That is really
love
funny.
that.
I love that too.
I love when we have different opinions about books, but I also love it when we have like the exact same opinion.
So do I. I love it. It's great. All right. What would you rate the book, Theresa, out of 1 to 10? We 1 to 10 on this podcast.
Yes, we do 1 to 10. And I'm seeing more people do that now, so I don't feel so odd. For this book, I kept going back and forth. I put it at 8 because I love Rebecca Ross and I've read so much of her stuff. And I think the story is so good. But I did have problems with Halcyon's point of view. And I did have I did think that her writing tightens up a little bit when in her later books. So
Yes.
this is only her 3rd book that she has ever
Yes.
published.
And interestingly enough, I just read her first book, and the writing is even tighter in this book than from her first book. So I love
Right.
that you can see that progression.
Yes. How about you? What'd you put?
Like a 9.75. I really loved this book.
Okay, yeah, you did. When you were texting me about it, I could tell that you really, really liked this book. I I will say this, and this is probably because I am a stereotypical fantasy lover. I think I liked this world and this story better than Divine Rivals because it's the
Really?
way that it feels. Yeah, I like Divine Rivals. I think it's so unique, and I love the typewriter, all of that. But I think that this book just spoke a little bit more to my love of fantasy
It's more traditional fantasy.
because A River Enchanted and her Wild Reverence are more of that Greek, Roman mythology, even medieval mythology, and I really like that. Wild Reverence is so good, Kate. You have to read it. You have to read Wild
I
Reverence.
know. I've been like putting it off because it is so good.
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah.
I'll
I
read
think
it on our trip.
there you go. Yeah, that one is really good. So yeah, I really liked this book, I have to say. But again, we're Rebecca Ross fans, and there's a reason. She writes good stuff. And if you don't like spice, this is perfect. Like,
It
this is
is.
absolutely
It's
perfect.
perfect.
There's not a hint of spice in this entire
Nope.
book. So
Nope.
love it.
It's
I
so
love
good.
it.
So good.
So, all right. Just as a reminder, in 2 weeks, we are going to be reviewing Rifles for Watie, and we're going to be together. We're really excited.
Yeah.
Yes. We're going to be together, and we're going to have a guest, my wonderful, beautiful mother-in-law, Lori.
Yes. That'll be fun for us. And she won't be our last guest, probably.
No,
I think we should mention that.
Yes, we already have some other people that have volunteered to be guests and other people that I have asked to be guests.
Yes, exactly. So
yes.
you'll get to, it sounds like you'll be meeting a lot of our family, actually.
Yes. But you know what? As we mentioned before, both of our families are big reading families. So it makes sense.
Some of them read different things than we do, which is great. So it'll expose us to some different books.
I have never read Rifles for Watie, and I don't think I would have picked this up, but I am convinced I'm going to love it. So
yeah,
I think that's fantastic.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for listening. We've had some listeners and we really appreciate that.
Yes. And we are looking forward to doing this next book, and we hope that you come back and listen to our next podcast.
Yes. So we will see you next time.
See you next time. Bye.
Bye.